Hello everybody and welcome to our first talk in the Planted Unplugged series entitled Wright to Repair in association with our friends at Biotecture. Essentially today we're going to be looking at how design can contribute to the circular economy and our ability to repair the products and spaces that we surround ourselves with every day. My name's Oliver Heath and I'm the Biophilic Design Advisor for Planted, the first contemporary design show aiming to reconnect our cities with nature. Today, as we explore how design, architecture, sustainability and nature can combine to create cleaner, greener, healthier and happier cities, I'm delighted to welcome four of the UK's experts when it comes to understanding our connection to the products and spaces we surround ourselves in and their contribution to the circular economy. Now, not so long ago, and actually in my lifetime, darning a pair of socks, fixing a drill or a lawnmower, fixing things in general was something that we all took part of and we took a lot of care and attention of. It was something we could be proud of. But these days it seems that so many of the products we surround ourselves in are designed for the manufacturer's eyes only. Many of the most successful commercial products are designed intentionally to deter repair, reuse and recycling. So when did we get stuck? When do we lose that right to repair? And importantly, how can we, as designers, reclaim that and create products that are fit for the future? After all, if we don't, then the waste that we create will surely suffocate the spaces that we live in. So today we've got four fantastic speakers. We've got Claire Potter from Claire Potter Design. She's the founder of multidisciplinary design studio Claire Potter Design. The work of the studio is focused around the development of the circular economy through design of spaces and products. She leads the BSc Product Design course at University of Sussex. She is also the group coordinator of the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, all around the reuse of fishing nets, and a regional rep for Surfers Against Sewage. We have Duncan Baker-Brown, who is an architect, academic, and environmental activist. Author of the Reuse Atlas, a designer's guide towards creating a circular economy. He's practiced, research and taught around issues of sustainable development for more than 25 years, with projects as diverse as the House of the Future and the Brighton Waste House. He's currently the principal investigator of two EU research programs focusing on the reuse and construction, building deconstruction and reconstruction, and has recently been nominated for the RIBA's council seat. We have Greg Lavery from Wright Furniture. Greg did a PhD and his research was into sustainable design, building design, working across the field of engineering and architecture. He's the founder of Wright Office Designer, a circular economy manufacturer of office furniture that works with organisations including British Land, JLL, Vinci and a host of other universities. Wright's office furniture, as I'm sure he will tell you, has an 80% smaller carbon footprint than furniture made from virgin sources. And last but not least, we have Hugo Valluri from the Restart Project. And he is the co-founder and policy lead of the Restart Project, a London-based charity fixing our relationship with electronics. Restart pushes for legislation for the right to repair across the UK and Europe. They also are very public-facing. They have restart parties, which are community events that encourage people to bring their broken electronics, to open them up, to fix them, and get them back into use. The Restart Project is one of the founders of the European Right to Repair campaign, a coalition pushing for the universal right to repair. So first off, what I'd like to do is to ask each of our speakers just to introduce themselves a little bit more, talk about their experiences and how their company, their organisation, their beliefs and experience contribute to the circular economy and the right to repair. So first of all, I'd like to ask Hugo, just tell us a little bit about yourself and the right to repair.
Yeah, so for the last 8 years, Restart has been running pop-up repair events, restart parties that fit with this ethos of giving a second lease of life to products and helping disaffected, frustrated people actually give a new lease of life to things that would otherwise likely have been thrown away. And these are things that range from headphones to printers to laptops, blenders, radios, turntables, speakers, TVs, you name it, all kinds of small electrical and electronic products. And the reason we focus on that is because electrical waste is the fastest growing stream of waste. Globally, it's surpassed 50 million tons a year, and it grows at 3 to 5% globally year on year. And also, we are terribly bad at recycling. We recycle about 20% of that worldwide, not more than that. And so the hidden secret is that in order to fix that problem, recycling better will not help us. We need to reuse and repair and prevent unnecessary throwaway of products in the first place. So that's how we approached all of this. And we have a unique perspective because we are, as you said, front-facing. We are engaging members of the public that have decided to say enough to this throwaway economy that they are engaged in by manufacturers, where the mantra that something will be more expensive to repair than it is to replace is not true, but it's been pushed out so much over the last maybe 20 years or more that people are kind of feeling this and giving up. Also, we've lost faith and our connection with the commercial repair sector, which still exists in some areas. And so part of our work is also to remap the reliable repair businesses that on a day-to-day are doing this work. We have a repair directory which covers for now part of London, already 115 businesses that are proud of their work so much that they are happy to give warranty on their repairs. And so because in 2020 we cannot at the moment run community repair events, we need to think collectively about how are the other ways that we can push a different message. And we've been working with designers who've been attending our events and seen with their eyes how people actually care about the products they already own, particularly if they were made well in the first place, but they hold emotional value. And so people want to repair, want to do the right thing, except often manufacturers are putting a lot of barriers to that. And that's why we've been, over the last few years, primarily focusing on the right to repair movement. So bringing together a coalition of organizations that are including a strong community focus on those that run repair cafes around the world, and community organizations that are looking at people, not consumers first, and looking at how planet can benefit from a different approach to the way we make. Universal right to repair means actually having products that are not built to make it hard to be repaired. So design is crucial because design for repairability and later on recyclability, the two are connected. So making it easy to replace a component without breaking a device further. But equally, there's other considerations such as making sure the manufacturers are required to make spare parts as well as repair manuals available to everyone. That's why we call it universal right to repair. We don't want it to be restricted to just authorized repair businesses. We want it to be wide and open because no manufacturer can provide sufficient repair capacity to cater for the whole world of people owning their products. And increasingly, we see the threat of obsolescence driven by software. So it's another aspect of design, how products that are consistently now connected to the internet are potentially not upgradable the way people would like to, and lose their features over time, forcing people to buy the new one because it's no longer secure or supported for the apps that they need. And that's how we found, we created a coalition called the European Right to Repair campaign, which pushes for these changes to occur primarily at European level, because we see that that region and that market has the opportunity to influence design practices worldwide. But we are also active in the UK with the Manchester Declaration, where we ask everyone to push for better design products, whether you're a designer or a manufacturer or a policymaker, to reduce all these barriers. So connecting people to what they want to do, which is reusing and repairing and not buying unnecessary new things, by doing it hands-on and removing the legal barriers that make it impossible for right now.
Great, thank you. Greg, can you ask you a little bit about your experiences with Wright office furniture?
Yeah, I mean, the big surprise to us when we started looking at what was going on in the furniture industry is that there is a practice of stripping everything out and skipping it. Every time an office moves or every time there's a rebrand, which means that's a sort of 5 or so year cycle. And that led to some staggering statistics. So for example, every single working day in the UK, 300 tons of office furniture goes to landfill. Another 200 tons get smashed up and sent to recycling. So imagine how many lorry loads, 500 tons per day. It's an astonishing amount of furniture. So that got our interest. And then when we dug deeper into the research, if you look at the entire 40 to 50 to 60 year life of a commercial building, within that, the greenhouse footprint, including operational energy, foundations, walls, ceilings, aircon, all that sort of stuff, 30% of the lifetime greenhouse gas emissions of the whole building is due to furniture, due to this destructive cycle. And so we said, well, that's crazy. What can we do about that? Now, we sort of got lucky because the better brands of furniture out there, the likes of Herman Miller, Orange Box, Vitra, have designed their products for repair, reconfigurability, and they design beautiful systems that go together very well. And that's being thrown out. So what we said is, let's put some engineering know-how behind bringing that furniture back to as new condition. And when we did that, we found there's an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. There's a roughly 50% reduction on price. And we can do that with long-term unemployed people with disabilities. So there's a social, environmental, and economic triple bottom line from remanufacturing, just through the application of some really good engineering principles to how one thinks about an item of furniture and how we can get that into future lives. And of course, we're looking at leasing. We're looking at all sorts of different options to buy back and take back that furniture so that we remanufacture that over and over again. The importance of the designer, though, is absolutely paramount, because often that decision to strip the whole building out was taken on the advice of a designer. So there's a little bit of guilt there, because remember, clients want a beautiful, stylish office. However, designers aren't thinking about what furniture's in there, what ceiling tiles, what flooring treatments, what wall treatments can be remanufactured. And right to the architectural point, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, of walls. Can we reuse partition walls, glass meeting room walls, for example, and even reuse kitchens? So there's all sorts of startups occurring that are addressing those particular niches. And I suppose what really inspires me is that the design community is starting to get its arms around this and is starting to change in the way it thinks about it. So this is a really interesting discussion about what's going on, because I think we're at a point of change where designers are saying there is a better way here. My products, I want to design in remanufacturability into those. And architects and interior designers are embracing those products and the circularity of those to say, I want to see a second, a third, a fourth life for these products because they're beautiful and they're stylish and they're expensive for the company. So actually, let's specify remanufactured, which, by the way, breaks that traditional design dilemma of, do we go for quality or do we go for price, right? Client wants low price but high quality. Well, right in the middle there is remanufactured. In fact, near to the lower price is the remanufactured, and that's what's tremendously exciting.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you. Some quite shocking statistics in there as well.
Indeed, yeah.
Duncan, tell me a little bit about your experiences with circular economy and reuse.
Well, I want to start with a story from when I was a kid, actually, because I was brought up in Epping Forest, which starts in Walthamstow in East London, and but we lived just in the countryside. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was walking up this field with my mother. We got to the top of it, and I couldn't remember being so far away from our house before. And I thought I was walking into more and more countryside. And we got to the top, and I pointed to the horizon. I said, "What's that, Mum?" And she said, "That's London." And I was looking at the NatWest Tower. And a couple of years after that, I watched the M11 and the M25 plough through countryside. And the Passenger Bridge, which is where my grandfather proposed to my grandmother, you came out of Walthamstow to the countryside to this place to propose to my grandmother, is now an interchange between the M25 and the M11. So from a really early age, I was really very aware of the sort of tension between human development and the natural world, and I was always on the side of the natural world from my point of view as a kid. Fast forward, I'm studying architecture part-time and working, and I worked on a project in the mid-80s for a client, a super rich person, and it was their second kitchen in their house, and it was worth £100,000 then. And the amount of waste, and it was beautiful, but the amount of waste that went aside with it just to make this. So I just thought, this is not the way, I'm going to go and work for Greenpeace. But I changed my mind. I decided to sort of be an activist, and that's why I call myself an environmental activist, within my chosen, in this case, profession. So I've been an architect for quite a long time. And we've been lucky enough to focus on sustainable design, sustainable development. And since the mid-90s, every about sort of 8 to 10 years, we've had an experimental project in the office. We started with something called Future House, and then we did the house that Kevin built, which was focusing on how you could have a zero waste house on site, made out of as much as possible organic grown material that locks carbon. And that project was great. And the point there was that I was really interested in the supply chain. As an architect, I want to know what the materials are made, what they are, and where they come from, and the negative impact of choosing that material. And most probably, the other thing that I'm really interested in is the waste associated with the construction industry. Because, say in about 2010, for every 5 houses we built, 1 house worth of waste went to landfill and incineration. Now we've improved that now. We're down to only 120 million tonnes a year of waste from the construction industry, which represents a figure of about every 6 to 7 houses. Then 1 house worth goes to waste. So then I set myself a challenge. I've been teaching since 1994 because I realised there needed to be a lot of communication, and I needed to learn loads as well. And so in 2014, we completed what's called the Brighton Waste House. And that was built with students from across different institutions, academic institutions. It's on campus at the University of Brighton. 90% of that building, which isn't a house, it's a permanent teaching resource building, 2 stories. It creates 30% more energy than it consumes. 90% of it is material other people threw away. It's built to passive house design details and aspirations. And crucially, it's designed to be a material store for the future. So it's designed to be disassembled. But it actually became a bit of a polemic as well. So we collected 25,000 toothbrushes to put in the cavities of the walls and stuff. So it became not a way of building in the future, it became more of a what if. And before Blue Planet 2, not many people understood the consequences of designing things without an end-of-life strategy. And that's my passion, is communicating and practicing, because I'm in practice as well, ways in which you can design things so they're a material resource at the end of their life, so they can carry on again and again. Because, by the way, until 1910, that is how we designed. And what happened in 1910 in this country is that we added cement to the mortar mix instead of it being lime. So we stuck bricks together and they couldn't be unstuck. And before then, it was a lime mortar, and anyone that owns a Victorian or a Georgian building knows that they can play around with them ad infinitum. That's all we're trying to do, is to replicate what we did, until our country became so affluent on its empire. It plundered materials from its empire that it created this concept of waste. Until about 1861, there was no such thing as waste, actually. Everything got consumed. So because I've luckily been in this world where we've had these sort of experimental projects, and I've done teaching and research as well as referred to, I've got this amazing network. I went and found amazing people like you guys and Claire. But then beyond this country, people are actually, at the moment, deconstructing buildings that you think had to be demolished, like part of the World Trade Center in Brussels, which is only 20 years old. It's due for demolition because it's a financial district. Buildings are coming down because no one liked them in the first place, and they have to be rebooted and redesigned all the time. These buildings are being carefully dismantled, and they're a material store for new buildings. And that's what I'm really passionate about, proving that we don't have to, we can close down conventional mines, and what we've got to do is mine the Anthropocene, which is the geological epoch we're in at the moment, the sort of stuff that we've you've covered planet Earth with. And that's what I'm passionate about.
Great. Thank you. So the materials are there, we just need to find a way of reusing them.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Claire, could you tell us a little bit more about your experiences?
Sure. So I'm going to start with a story from when I was a kid as well. So grew up in Brighton, always by the sea, and I wanted to be a marine biologist. So like a lot of kids growing up by the sea, that's what you want to do. Didn't even occur to me that you might travel somewhere else to work though. Of course, there isn't a huge need for marine biologists in Brighton. So I ended up being really passionate about the natural world, the natural environment. This is the time of the greenhouse effect and learning about ecology at school. And that's what I wanted to do. And fast forward a few years and I ended up at the University of Brighton doing interior architecture, which is actually where I met Duncan. And it was at that point I started to have my eyes open to the fact that as designers, as creators, we have a huge amount of responsibility for whatever we're creating. We are manifesting something into the world, whether it's a building, whether it's a thing, whether it's a car, a piece of clothing. And that started my sort of amalgamation of my love of ecology and the natural world, the responsibility that I felt even as a young child, all the way through to thinking, and now I can do something about it. So working through interior architecture, I then set up my own design studio. And that was the focus, that was the starting point. Why do something terrible when you can do something great? And it was about how to take the knowledge that I was learning daily, because all of our sectors change on a daily basis, and then being able to talk to clients in such a way that wasn't to belittle them, but was to encourage them to say, yes, but can we do this instead? Or yes, have you thought about that? And then spreading that knowledge and building something far, far better than it could have been. Now my studio does a multitude of things. So we do lots of sort of like behaviour change campaigns, working directly with the public, again, educating, as well as physical projects. And another sort of quite interesting link between what my studio does now and my childhood passion was marine plastic and particularly fishing litter. So you said I'm the working group coordinator for the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, which is a cross-sectorial global organisation linking everything from governments through to NGOs and small designers. But it's looking at how the fishing industry can not only be responsible for the waste that they're producing, predominantly through the type of fishing nets and stuff that's used, the equipment that's used for fishing. But when we think about it, many years ago, but not that long ago, we were using natural materials to do all of our fishing. And if it escaped, if it was lost by accident, which most nets are, they're not usually abandoned, they are mostly lost, it could degrade. But now we're using stronger materials, we're using bigger nets, and you're talking about polypropylene and polyethylene. It will last 600, 700, 800 years, we don't know. We're now finding plastic at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of our ocean. That is the scale of the impact we're having. But as material, if we can get it back and we can use it, like we're saying, we're mining the Anthropocene. We're taking stuff out of our natural environment that's causing harm and doing great stuff with it. So we look at how we can take those materials, use local remanufacturing techniques, small scale injection molding, but then also linking it into something that might be able to repair somebody's washing machine or their sunglasses. So really, really interesting sort of connection between your locality and your local makers. And I'm also really, really, really pleased to spread that education even further. So I'm now taking over course convener roles, the head of design at the University of Sussex on the BSc product design course. And all of the guys and girls that are coming into the product design course, they are the people that are going to be making all of this stuff. Everything around us has been designed by somebody. And if we can equip them with the passion, the drive, the anger, and the knowledge to build excellent stuff that can be disassembled, can be repaired, has a longevity to it, allows us that emotional attachment. Those are the people that can be making brilliant stuff for us all to be part of. So that's what I'm really, really keen to spread as far as possible.
Some really shocking statistics about the state that we're in from all of you. And it's interesting how, whilst obviously we're talking at it from a design perspective and we all have an involvement in design, a lot of it is about sort of social engagement as well. And Claire, I just wanted to ask you, because you're obviously sort of engaged with a new generation, maybe Gen Z, a generation that won't have grown up necessarily being able to fix things. They're not likely to be owning their houses. They may not be, appropriately skilled to be taking things apart like many of us did as we were growing up. How do you engage somebody with the concept of designing for repair when they don't have the skills or the knowledge or foresight to do it themselves in the first place? I mean, where do you start?
The first thing we tend to do is try to empower them by making them do. So one of the modules I run is called The Role of Design in the Circular Economy. It does exactly what it says on the tin. And part of that is designing for disassembly, which you can't ask a new product designer, a third-year product designer to design anything for disassembly if they don't know how that is put together. So one of the first things I get them to do is to take things apart, understand how fixings work, what takes a long time, how do you have the correct driver for that, why do you not have the correct driver for that, what is that material, how is it connected to the next thing. So actually by taking things to pieces, and we're talking about kettles, toasters, stuff that is readily available, but they've probably never ever taken to pieces. I was lucky I grew up in an education system that we were always making something, we were doing something physical, whether it was welding through to metalwork, through to anything to do with haberdashery, fabric, all the way down to nuts and bolts stuff. They don't have that. Our education system has moved into this high-tech, create a file digitally, look at it on a screen, 3D print it. Great, but do you know how that thing works? No, they don't. But by showing them how real things are constructed, they can start to go, oh, right, now I understand, and start to get angry, which then drives their passion to create something that's not like the £10 toaster that I've taken to pieces, that's taken 3 of them 2 hours, and then you talk about minimum wage and material recovery, and how much do you think that is per gram as a raw material? And they start to see the disconnection between a thing that's been built cheaply, but not for any kind of longevity, and therefore what they can do about it. So really igniting that passion and anger is really key.
And Hugo, I just want to come to you because obviously you're involved with a whole other set of people around the repair initiatives and getting people taking things apart. What sort of age groups are you sort of looking at? And are you seeing a difference between maybe the baby boomers, the Generation X, the millennials, the Gen Zs? I mean, who are coming to your Restart events?
Well, it is a very varied audience of participants. There's certainly like people that come with love devices that are very, very old. Tend to be people that are a bit older because for them it's a no-brainer. Like they've been seeing that and they're frustrated because it's no longer a language that many people can understand, even if they approach a commercial outlet to repair something that's very dear to them. But we're also seeing young people actually quite easily engageable on this topic. So we've run specific events with young people and they love to take stuff apart. And for them, often they've not grown to understand why it would be impossible to take something apart. So they expect it to be repairable. So I actually have a lot of faith in the young generation in that respect. They get it straight away. And we've seen kids take apart a mobile phone to learn about what resources went into making that phone and why it's important that they're designed to last. So our volunteers, however, we do not have as many very young volunteers. We have volunteers that tend to be a little bit older and that come from all kinds of walks of life, like from software designers, software engineers, to actually product designers sometimes, people that used to be a repairer in their profession and then retired, or just simply people that said enough to this throwaway and learned themselves little by little DIY and want to share the skills to inspire the next generation of fixers.
Okay, so we've heard from Claire, who's involved with the education, so students coming in. We've heard from Hugo about people volunteering and wanting to actively fix the things. But Greg, you're trying to make a business out of all of this.
Yeah.
Why doesn't the repair economy work in a developed consumer country? And why does it suddenly seem like a protest movement? Can you make it into a business where it's profitable? And how do you do that?
Well, you can, and I think we've proven that you can. We're growing, sort of doubling every year in revenue, and that's been wonderful for us. But more importantly, I think what it proves is that for many product categories, and we're just in the furniture game. There's also a whole bunch of other aspects of buildings, and for that matter, products that can be repaired. And the reason that the driver of the economics is that we're in such a throwaway culture that there's so much free stuff that's otherwise going to landfill the economists talk about arbitrage, right? You get something for nothing. Whilst our labour rates in this country are justifiably high, right? We don't want to be paying people a pittance. We want to see the real living wage right throughout the community, right? So you pay people a reasonable real living wage to survive or higher, obviously going as high as possible. That then creates a whole lot of social benefits, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff in there. But actually that even with those high labour rates, putting the work in to repair something, it can then be sold at a higher price that actually covers that labour and a little bit more, right? So we make a small margin on that, and that starts a cycle, right? And then interestingly, we make more money on the furniture that comes back, that we buy back or we take back or we've sold, we've leased to a client. We make more money because we put the right effort into getting it right the first time, in the first round of remanufacturing. So that for us is the sort of gold mine, right? Let's keep, and in Duncan's language, let's keep remining those resources, and let's make sure we've got an eye on them to control them through multiple lives, through relationship with designers and relationship with clients.
Okay. So I can kind of get my head around how you might be able to take a piece of furniture apart. It's a series of screws and maybe a few different kind of tools. But you get to the building level, Duncan. I mean, how do you engage a client to go, this is a building that's going to be right for you now, and it's going to be right for the next owner and the owner again. Beyond that, how do you get them to care and to create a business case for the adaptability and reuse of a building?
Well, if we start at a relatively large scale, we're near a lot of large buildings at the moment. And the sort of investors the financial investors in these large buildings, tend to be on a sort of 20 to 30 year plan. And at the end of that plan, the building is a bit of a deficit. Over that 30-year period, it might have been stripped out 6 or 7 times. It might have had its facade removed once. And then at the end, when it's 30 years old, they definitely need a new image for this building. Now, with my research and the books I've written, if you go to the Netherlands, if you go to the National Bank, the AMB AMRO Bank there, they describe themselves as a financial bank, but also a materials bank now. They're using the language of the circular economy because they have built buildings and invested in buildings that at the end of their life are a material and therefore financial asset. So they make more money at the end of the day if they're not throwing the thing away, because they can either repurpose the materials within their own portfolio of buildings, or they can sell it on to other people. But the great thing about the circular economy is that it offers other modes of contractual obligations. So instead of buying and owning everything, you can lease stuff. You can even lease Lux now. Instead of buying light fittings, Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, one of the biggest airports in Europe, all the light fittings there are leased back to Philips. So that people that own the airports do not own the light fittings. Why is that a good idea? Because the people that make the light fittings are responsible for getting rid of those light fittings. So they design them so it's easier to do that, but they don't want to get rid of it. It's a material source. They're getting hundreds of thousands of tons of resources back to them, and they know they've got to do something with it. So they make other light fittings with it. That's the circular economy. A lot of it makes complete financial sense. And actually, where we are now, in the middle of a COVID pandemic, financiers know about this. They understand this. I've been to plenty of conferences and gatherings over the last 2 years where the people speaking the most sense are the insurers, who understand more than most about the climate emergency, and the investors, who are not going to invest in schemes that the climate and ecological emergency are going to destroy or flood or whatever or burn. We're in that world now. So the thing that I've been lucky enough to do is, because I've written books around it, because I've mixed academic pursuit with teaching and practice, like we all have actually, I found out about loads of amazing schemes that are actually happening. They may be quite low profile, but the bottom line is, at the moment, we've got the financiers involved, we've got the lawyers involved, the politicians, the consultants, the designers, and the clients. They're all trying to do something for good. And in every sector, you will find people who know what the circular economy is now. So it's definitely doable. And at the scale of the building, I would say, if you know how to design buildings, you're an architect or an engineer, you know how to design buildings, you know how to put them together, you know what? If you give it some thought, you know how to take them apart as well. And I'm working with architects who, Rotor Deconstruction in Brussels, there's another one called Bellestock in Paris. They're deconstructing 60-story tower blocks and redistributing the material within the we're in a place where it's being taken seriously.
What do you think the barriers are to engaging maybe the everyday architect or designer with that idea that it's not just about putting things together, it's about taking responsibility for making sure they can be taken apart again?
One way you can point out that they already have the knowledge. You know, if they're into the detailed design of buildings, they're thinking about every component of the building goes together, like Claire does with products, etc. And you guys do with what you do. So we know how those things go together. I'm sorry, we do know how they come apart. We know the difficult bits. So the bits where we specify expanding foam to create an airtight junction or whatever. Try and avoid that, because it is the biggest pain in the neck if you're coming to a 10-year-old building that needs to be deconstructed. But a lot of it is more straightforward than one would think, and that's the other message that I'm always trying to put out there. At one level, even I can do it, but not to be sort of cute, but actually to say we have the collective knowledge to do this. One of the biggest pluses for the Waste House project I did was we pointed out that 360 students, some as young as 15, could build to passive house standards, very high standards of construction. But also what was amazing there is so many people who are in effect trained around that sort of sensibility. I mean, what I learned off those kids was amazing. And while we're talking about kids, this year is the year that you got those climate strikers joining tertiary education, going into colleges and universities. They are expecting the courses to be the sorts of courses that we would all like them to be. And I've got a new role at the University of Brighton School of Architecture. I'm they've called me climate champion, climate literacy champion. That's what my new, and it's not for the kids, it's for the staff. The staff have got to get, they've all got to be on learning more. That's the issue. The kids are all on board.
Claire, what do you see the barriers and the kind of people that you're engaging with? Because you're both a working designer and also an educator. Tell me more about the barriers to kind of creating that kind of repair economy and circular economy.
I think it comes in lots of different levels. I think when you're working with clients who come to you and say, this is the way we've always done it. If people are saying that to you, it's usually because they haven't been challenged before. This is the easy way of doing it. And sometimes the barrier just comes through communication and education and showing the value that can be created on a short term and a long term. And actually economics comes so much into it. There's a reason why economy comes after circular in everything that we're talking. We're talking about circularity, but we're also talking about the economics and we're talking about cash. So when you can demonstrate to somebody that, it might cost a little bit more in the first instance, but then over a 10-year period or a 20-year period, or it might actually be something that's going to cost them slightly less. So the main barrier really is educating people and allowing them to see beyond maybe what the status quo has been within an organisation. I'm very lucky. I tend to work with people who have already got a little bit of a base knowledge and they're asking questions, which means they can be pushed a little bit further. For the generation that I'm now helping to educate at Sussex, exactly what Duncan said. When I first started teaching circular economy at Sussex was maybe 7 years ago. And back then nobody knew what circular economy meant. They went, oh, is this the eco module? Which just made me shiver. But they didn't have a huge amount of base knowledge to begin with. And every single year, as I've started teaching, the next, the third year cohort, as they come to me, they've got a better base knowledge. I was like, right, you understand that, now I can push that a little bit further. So every year, they're getting more angry, they're getting more passionate, they're getting more knowledgeable. And the stuff that maybe 7 or 8 years ago designers didn't really know, the students, they now know, and they want to know more of, which is incredibly powerful. So the barrier for them is very, very thin. They're ready to go. The new generation is ready to go and chomping at the bit, and they want to change things for the better, which to me isn't a barrier at all. It's actually a huge opportunity.
And Greg, obviously, you were talking about these incredible numbers of 500 tons of office furniture going into landfill every day. Design has a really key role to play. I mean, is it just kind of the cheaper office furniture that you can't pull apart, you can't fix? Design. What role does design have in making products available to you that you can then sort of send back out?
Yeah, good question. So what we're seeing now, so we talk about 3 generations of remanufacturing of office furniture, but it could apply to just about any product. The first generation is just taking the best of what we got right now and giving them a bit of a spit and polish so they're as good as new, right? And that's there's only in the furniture game maybe 10-15% of furniture you can do that with, right? And that's your Vitras and your own boxes and your Then there's another sort of 85 to 90% of furniture. Generation 2 for us is about upcycling that, so making that better than it ever was. But the problem is your generation 1 and 2 is really only dealing with a waste problem, right? Someone out there has made a material decision, the designer of that furniture in the first instance has made a decision, and we're living with the consequences of trying to make the best of a bad situation. What excites us is generation 3, which is where we think about, let's call it forever furniture. So design decisions made, so that furniture can be remanufactured over and over again. I'll give you a really simple example. Melamine faced chipboard, right? And we all grimace at that because you take a forest, you shred it down to particles about that big, you put a plastic front and bottom on it, and you get a hard-wearing surface that's hard-wearing until you get one scratch. Now, what do you do when you've got a scratch on it? So you call up the recycling companies, as we did a few years ago, and the response is, well, sure, we could recycle it, but you end up with dust. And there's no economic market for dust, right? So you've taken a forest to dust in just one step, right? What a disaster. What we're excited about is taking plastic, preferably, or always post-consumer, preferably from an environmental sink like the ocean, and then reconfiguring that plastic. Now, plastic, the term thermoplastic means you can heat it up and reshape it without any loss of property, without any visual distortion, and you can do that over and over again if you get the temperature right. So we've got our product design team getting those temperatures right. Because imagine if you took that melamine faced chipboard around the world, which is millions of tons a year, and replaced that with ocean plastic, made into beautiful tops that are really attractive, have a character to them, that you can put in a desk or a pedestal or a boardroom table that says, we care in our company about what we do. And that's a message not just for staff, but for new recruits. Those same students that you're teaching at the moment, in 5 years' time, will be hot property on the personnel market, right, as resources for companies that want to change the world. But also visitors and potential clients, right? So if you're a law firm, having someone come into your office and instead of saying, gosh, that's an expensive table, I'm paying for that out of my fee, and creating a really adversarial style relationship right from the start. Imagine a law firm has a client walk in and go, that's an interesting table, what the hell is that? Oh, that's recycled yogurt pots, right? You can see the bits of foil that are included in there. Wow, you care as a law firm about the environment, so do I. That's then a value-based relationship, which is off on a much better step, first step in terms of building that relationship and keeping that relationship. So the world's changing with all those factors.
And Hugo, we hear about the kind of like the rise of smart technology and everything has to be connected to the internet. You mentioned a little bit about that kind of the internet of everything and how things all have the software updates and everything. For me, a bugbear is this concept of a smart product. You know, a smart product is actually only something that's connected to the internet, but not necessarily one that has the potential for reuse and the recycling. So, you know, in a way, it's just a completely dumb product. It's a linear product. How do you think we should best change the approach to design and create for repairability? And in part, you know, what makes a good repairable product as opposed to a bad one? What are the things that we should be looking out for as consumers? And equally as designers, what are the kind of pitfalls that we should stay away from?
I think, like, based on what we heard in the last few minutes, there's really an issue that I'd like to raise with regards to design and designers for when it comes to electrical and electronic products. It is unfortunately not as simple to actually push this design mind for more repairable, longer lasting products all the way to those manufacturers and the briefs that they put out. And why is that? Well, we can talk and be quite happy about, you know, some developments of the circular economy, but the reality is that shareholder capitalism that is at the heart of a lot of these giant corporations and, you know, the Apples, the Samsungs, and all of the others is such that it's not easy to push a different approach to how products are made. So consumers are really fed up, and you know, in the UK, 75% of all people want government to take action so that manufacturers will be required by law to make products more repairable. And at European level, it's 80+%. So it is consistent, and it's actually not even political, like it's across the political spectrum everywhere. But the reality is that how do we change the rules of the game so that designers who often agree with us off the record, you know, we've heard people involved in some of these big unrepairable products tell us, yes, you're right, we want it, but you can't do that much apart from walking out of a job opportunity and then someone else will do it. And equally, some of the manufacturers that are trying to do things a bit differently for some of their products, still this is seen as fringe, and maybe the vast majority of their catalog is still not circular. And equally, there's another aspect that we should think about for a building or for an airport to get lighting that you don't ever own might well be the right approach. But when you talk about personal products, we've not seen that many circular models, designs that are actually attractive in terms of, say, owning or not owning a product, which ultimately often means that in case it does break, you are not allowed to get it repaired yourself. And you have to send it back. Maybe it will be repaired, but it might likely to be replaced. So circular means different things to different people. And often we've seen this closing the loop as something that can happen in very different ways. There's companies that want to control the whole life cycle of a product, kind of trying to shut down anyone from being able to repair independently the products. And there are others that instead are okay with putting everything out there, the information, the spare parts, and unlocking economic opportunities in the local communities. And that's the kind of circular economy that we'd like to see, where the inner circle of repair and reuse are unlocked. And so how can designers help? Often finding those avenues that will allow that kind of creativity to emerge. But for electrical and electronic products, this is frequently really hard because manufacturing at scale tend to happen elsewhere in the world, and there is a big disconnect. And also an attempt by manufacturers not to have to deal with the repair and reuse because they tend to get products manufactured the opposite corner of the world. So it is harder in a way, and that's why regulation we see as the only level playing field that can actually bring about a new push for an innovation that puts people and the planet. Otherwise, you're at risk of having this wonderful new generation of angry, up for it designers that get into the job market, and unless it's like a little startup project on a Kickstarter, they can't really design products that respect the vision and the ethical aim that they have.
Can I raise a point there,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oliver? And Hugo, building on your point there are some products that are remanufactured over and over again that increase in value, that are consumer products. So Rolex watches, for instance, increase in value, as we know. E-type Jaguars are more valuable now than when they were first built by a long way. And let's take an electronics product, so Technics 1200 turntables, right? The original vinyl, that you can resell them for more than you paid for them. So there are examples where companies have got the styling right, they've come up with beautiful products, they've come up with repairability, and they've captured the minds and the hearts of consumers so that they, over and over again, they're wanted and they change hands many times, they're repaired. So I wonder if there's something that our corporate world's missing in that inherent value of a beautiful, well-styled product. I mean, in our industry, Eames furniture, for instance, just increases in value. You buy Eames and it just increases in value. So it happens in all sorts of industries that we're all working in. Why is that, and why are conventional consumer products companies missing? Don't know.
Okay, maybe it's sort of fast fashion world is sort of taking
Maybe
over.
it's fast fashion, yeah. Maybe that's a dirty word, isn't it, really, in the
Yeah,
design community? Because that's where, and I'd love to hear Claire's thoughts on that. How do you tackle the mentality of fast fashion?
Well, it's really interesting you say about those items and how they increase in value. They're all big ticket price items to begin with. So they have had a huge amount of design, hours, time, integrity built into them. And from a consumer's perspective, you need to have quite a bit of cash to be able to buy that thing for it to be, up in value, even if it is coming sort of like secondhand, for example. The issue that we have quite often with circularity is not so much those really beautiful, expensive, wonderful things like the Technics, the Eames, the E-type Jags and Mini Coopers. It is the stuff that's on the lower end. And what I get quite concerned about is the fact that discussions around circularity should include all types of products, including the ones that are on the lower scale of the cost. So there has to be a happy balance between allowing everybody access to well-designed, well-made, safe items, regardless of what it is, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a piece of clothing, whether it's electronics. So should we have £5 toasters? That's a question I put to my students. Some of them say, no, we shouldn't. But then the other one will turn and say, what if I've only got £5 to spend on a toaster? Are you now excluding me from this whole conversation? So we've got a really, really interesting discussion that's going between cost, longevity, and making sure that everybody has access to circularity and not just those who can afford it in the first instance.
Well, can we displace the poor quality products with remanufacturing? And this is exactly what you're in the business of, right?
Well, the only way that you can do that is to set minimum barriers to actually putting a product on the market, and that's why we want right to repair regulation, so that the worst offending products wouldn't exist anyway, and everyone would have to compete to make products that are at least as repairable as minimum requirements would dictate, which means that if you need to replace a part, you wouldn't risk of destroying the product further, for example, or perhaps that in terms of software, you wouldn't be able to put on the market a smartphone for which you're not planning to provide at least 5 to 7 years of software updates. That's just an example. But just on that front of affordability, I think this is a really crucial point. Otherwise, we're risking just talking about an elitist view. A well-built product, one that can be repaired and refurbished and re-put back on the market, can last longer. And there is a false economy here with people that, understandably, because of economic constraints, end up buying that £5 toaster, but they might well end up buying it 10 times over the course of a lifespan of a really well-made toaster. Well, collectively, let's not forget, we're producing 10 times as much waste. So we need to create second-hand markets for products that are built to last.
Duncan, I just want to sort of jump in and ask you. I mean, this sort of use, this idea of sort of consumer technology and a lack of lifespan, a lack of ability to fix things, it's something that we struggle with in buildings. Over the last 10, 15 years, technology has moved on so quickly. No sooner have you fitted an LED light, then a few years later, they're stronger, they're brighter, they're cheaper. I mean, how do we ever keep up with that? How do we, integrate essential technology into a building whilst keeping it fit for the future? And when we talked, you mentioned a kind of an onion skin analogy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is that. There was a book from the early 90s by Stuart Brand called How Buildings Learn, and he was looking at in one of the chapters that the stuff that gets replaced weekly in a building, daily even, and then through to monthly, every year, decade. And so designing a building as a sort of series of layers, the thing that gets replaced daily in his story is the photocopy paper. So we do have to design so it's long life and loose fit. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the tech that goes into buildings, it does feel exactly like that. As soon as you've specified a certain bit of electronics, it's out of date. But you do need to design your building so these things can be taken out, because they will be quicker. But there's a positive take on all of this. There are buildings, if you think about tower blocks from the 1960s and 70s, they've been demolished over the last decades. One of the reasons that developers will say it's because you haven't got the raised floors and the suspended ceilings to take the gear, to take the wires and stuff. Well, the great thing with the technologies we've got now, we don't need those voids again. So, in fact, you don't need to demolish the buildings you thought you needed to demolish because technology's moved on. So, I think there's a positive take on all of it. But I just want to, the discussion's been fine, but I think we're missing out on the point of where we are today with the climate and ecological emergency, with the COVID pandemic. We are in a different place. What world are we proffering if we're saying we're going to continue to consume the way we do? Our consumption to buy a toaster for £5 includes the destruction of the natural environment, slave labour, etc., etc., etc. If you're okay with that, carry on with your £5 toaster, but you don't need to, because you can buy a second-hand one for the same sort of money. So we are in a different place. We're in a world now where 1 billion people live in regions that have declared a climate and ecological emergency and then said they're going to do something about it. In the UK, 90% of the population are in those local authority regions. They haven't only just said there's a climate and ecological emergency, they've then said what they're going to do about it, which is to somehow be net carbon zero within a decade. Those local authorities are running around now with their recovery plans, their COVID recovery plans, looking at solutions. And from the point of view of the built environment, it's responsible for half the problems that this planet's got. Half carbon emissions, half the consumption of resources, chop down rainforests, pollute the oceans, are to do with the built environment. And that's where they know they have to start. So, London has a circular economy route map. We're in the middle of drafting one with Brighton Host City at the moment for the construction sector, because it's the biggest sector in terms of consuming stuff, and that's the one you need to work on. But we're in a different world, and I feel really positive. There's a lot of knowledge out there, and people are having financiers, the big influences, the massive corporations. Where are Apple going to get their resources from in a decade time from now? They've got to work in a different way, because otherwise, you can't be rich enough now to isolate yourself from the problems this planet's got. And design is one of the ways we're going to get out of this pickle.
Okay. So your call to action, we're going to wrap it up now. You've got like 30 seconds. Your call to action to our viewers out there. What can we do in the design community to address the right to repair and the circular economy?
Well, you can design things like this phone. This is a fair phone. It's a third of the price of the latest Apple phone, iPhone, and it's designed to be remanufactured, as it were, and it comes with a screwdriver. That is the big difference. If the camera goes wrong, you unscrew it, you send it back to Fairphone, they give you a new one. So it's a parts. If I took this green thing off, you can see it all. It's lots of little screws in the back there. The headphones were damaged this week, so I got a new wire to attach to the earbuds, etc., and the microphone. I didn't have to throw the whole thing away. It's out there. Design your products, your buildings, your cities, so they're material stores for the future, not rubbish.
Brilliant. Claire, call to action.
Call to action is to educate yourself continually. The sector we're working in is changing on a daily basis. We've seen how COVID has completely changed our world, completely changed the way we're working, how we're interacting with people, but also we're understanding more where our stuff comes from. So, for example, when we had a flour shortage in Britain, it wasn't necessarily flour we were short of, it was the packaging that it went into. So we're understanding more, both as everyday public, but particularly as designers, how things are made, and that's something we need to do more of. As Duncan's already said, if you can design something and put it together, you can design it for disassembly. It is basically the backward step. So continue to be striving, continue to be learning, and support those companies that actually do have that same base knowledge as you. Support the ones that are striving to do better than best. Those are the ones that we need to keep going with. And that's the way I think we should all be working in the future, because we have to.
Greg, your call to action to our viewers.
So call to action is really, I suppose,